ahead and get started. Welcome to our June Reliability and Security Oversight Update. Happy Juneteenth. Thanks for joining us on your holiday. My name is Maylee Cook, and I am a Training and Outreach Coordinator here at WECC. We have a few announcements to get us started. First is our Reliability in the West discussion series. This happens every month, but not in July. So we will see you in August for the Reliability in the West discussion series. And then going on, also in August, we have our Power System Security Conference. This is our physical and cybersecurity conference that will take place on August. I had the date right in front of me. Of course, I don't anymore. It's in August. We're going to drop the information for you in the chat to register for that. That is in person here at our Salt Lake office. We would love to have you join us. And the information for participating that will be in that link provided in the chat. We also have our Grid Fundamentals course that will be here in our Salt Lake office as well. And that will be Tuesday, August 19th and Wednesday, August 20th. And that is a great opportunity to learn about the fundamentals of the grid. So if you'd like to register and attend that, we also have the information for registering in the chat. Going on to our antitrust policy. All WECC meetings are conducted in accordance with the WECC antitrust policy and the NERC antitrust compliance guidelines. All participants must comply with the policy and guidelines. This meeting is public, confidential, or proprietary information should not be discussed in open session. Next slide. This meeting is going to be recorded and will be posted publicly. By participating, you give your consent for your name, image, and likeness to be included in that recording. If you have any questions about any of the content shared today, please contact WECC's legal counsel. Here is our agenda for the day. We'll go ahead and begin with a NERC and WECC happening from Fahad Ansari. So we'll turn it over to you, Fahad.
Thank you, Bailey. And apologies to everyone. I am actually traveling right now, so we'll be having my camera turned off, and I'll quickly provide some significant NERC and WECC happenings. We might not have all the SMEs for the topics that we will be discussing today, but feel free to send in your questions if you have any via chat, and we'll get back to you. Next slide. Really quickly, first thing with NERC. NERC released their 2025 State of Reliability Report. And for this year, the report is divided into two main sections. One section is the State of Reliability Overview, the report that is available. And also that is available this year is 2025 State of Reliability Technical Assessment, which provides comprehensive annual analytical review of the BPS reliability for the year 2024. Next, we also have early bird registration for the GridSecCon. This event will be taking place from October 7th to October 10th at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. The early bird registration is now open. It will be open until July 14th. So feel free to check up on your availability and really look into if it's possible to register for that. It's a premier grid security conference. It's focused on promoting reliability of the BPS through training and education, delivering cutting-edge discussions on critical infrastructure, security threats, vulnerabilities, and lessons learned from senior industry and government leaders. Informing industry about security best practices for reliability concerns, risk mitigation, and cyber and physical security threat awareness. In the last two monthly meetings, monthly updates, I've mentioned that there will be a level 3 alert related to the IBR performance and modeling that'll be going out. So it has, NERC has released that, and it is now available for the entities to acknowledge and report on. The deadline for reporting on the essential actions is by October 18, 2025. Also related to the summer reliability is WECC has released the 2025 summer reliability overview. It's an overview of the Western Interconnect portion of the summer reliability assessment that NERC posted a few weeks ago. Those were it from my end, Millie. Thank you for giving me a few minutes on this.
Thank you so much for providing that update, Fahad. We'll make sure that this deck is posted, so if you need access to any of those items, those links are live for you to check out. Thank you so much, Fahad. All right, let's move on to our cold weather update with Curtis.
Cold weather update in June. Fantastic. It's about 95 degrees, I think, or something the next couple days here where I'm at. But it's always a good time to talk about cold weather. As you're aware, the cold weather data request was due June 15th, and we had a relatively good response. I know there's been some chasing of some individuals that's been going on. There's probably about a dozen folks who still have not yet responded. So if you hear my voice, listen to the knock on the door. The knock on the door may get louder to get that information in, so please act accordingly. If you're not sure we received it, certainly reach out. But that's going to be a yearly thing. This was the first year of it. Of course, it may change over time based on the standard, based on what we see. But having the most complete data set is the critical aspect of that data request. As soon as it's available to the regions, we'll start looking at it and evaluate what we need to do from that point. The second item is the small group advisory session. You might have seen a note go out on that. The general session is August 18th. This is for EOP 12-3 cold weather in general. The secondary sessions, the individual sessions are going to be August 19th through the 22nd. If you want an individual session, please take the time to submit that information to Derek Casimir of NERC by July 21st. We need to accommodate schedules, look at where people are available. It's a pretty good sized group behind the scenes in the small group advisory session, trying to support all the individual sessions. So please make sure you get that information, Derek, as soon as you can. Overall, we want questions, and even if you're not doing an individual engagement, the 19th through the 22nd, please go ahead and send questions about EOP 12-3, some of the concerns, some of the thoughts by August 1st to Derek as well. I think that's important that we capture everybody as much as we can and as widely as we can. So Maylee's been putting some links in the chat there for you to follow and to find out where some of that information is. I think one of the key things here that has also occurred in the cold weather world is NAGF teamed up with the EOP 12-3 standard drafting team and took on some implementation guidance. And implementation guidance is a way that can be followed, examples that can be followed to be shown to be in compliance. And they strategically addressed requirement 1 in extreme cold weather temperature and how that comes about. There's some very good examples in the document. It is posted out there on the proposed implementation guidance. Behind the scenes, what's called the OPCTF, the Operations and Planning Compliance Task Force. I'm a member, the primary member for WECC. We'll be evaluating that document for endorsement over the next couple of weeks here. But feel free to take a look at that. I think it gives some pretty good guidance based on what I've seen so far, but be looking forward to seeing that going through the process and getting that approval process. Implementation guidance is a great tool to use for entities, especially around some of those requirements that are a little fun to look at. So please don't hesitate to look at that. EOP 12-3, haven't heard anything from FERC. I wouldn't expect to hear anything from FERC until they do the order. I think next week, I believe it's the 26th, there's a FERC meeting. I suspect that the EOP 12-3 should be on that agenda. Behind the scenes, the ERO Enterprise is working on the PDS, periodic data submittal actions necessary to approve, validate generator cold weather constraints and CAP, corrective action plan extensions. So be aware that we're looking at that. Hopefully we'll be able to, we'll have to respond to anything that FERC may say next week if they say anything. EOP 12 is not showing on the agenda. Thank you, Mike. I'll reach out to some folks and see what's going on there then. But needless to say, behind the scenes, there's a lot of effort to get us prepared on the ERO Enterprise side, and we need to provide some outreach to you on some of the constraint opportunities and some of the CAP extension expectations. We do have some forms that we have created to help support that effort. But from that respect, I think that's all I have from the cold weather perspective. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send them to me and I'll try to address them as best as possible. I'll hand it back to you, Maylee.
Thank you, Curtis. We'll go ahead and turn the time over to Donovan.
All right. Thanks, Maylee. Appreciate it. So we've got a few standards updates with NERC and WECC focuses. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll go ahead and start with the NERC standards happenings. And this one will be focused on our 901 projects that are going on. The 901 workshop just finished up. That was the first week of June here. It was a good time for industry, OEMs, a lot of different groups, the drafting teams to come together, present where they're standing, what their hope is for moving forward with some of these projects, and answer some questions. So the first 2 days were panels of the drafting teams and also of different industry groups, and then day 3 was individual drafting team meetings that were not broadcast over WebEx, but we're open to those that were there. Lots of good came out of that, questions and some good direction based off of initial ballots for the ballot period 1, which we've put up here. The project 2022-02, the 3 standards that were balloted during that one, all of them were roughly around that 40%, between 34, 35 to 41% at the failure rate for that. But it does give the drafting team some good direction on what questions they need to answer. There was good feedback on what industry would like to see changes for the next ballot comment period. So they're working on those. The project 2021-01, the mod 33, it also failed. It got a little bit more support, but some changes will be needed for that as well. And then the project 2020-06, mod 26-2, that closed yesterday. They haven't released the results from that yet, so I can't give the percentage on where they stand, but most likely there will be some pretty big changes that need to happen to that as well, based off industry comment. So they're working on getting ready for their second ballot and comment period. They haven't officially stated anywhere that I know of, but there's the possibility and a hope that maybe there will be a third ballot and comment period based on the time frame, and if they can get that to work out on the time frame of the order. But for right now, they're working on the second ballot and comment period to see if they can get a product that can get industry sign off on that and get buy-in, hopefully above that 40% that they're sitting at right now. But that's where the 901 projects are currently standing. There's lots of drafting team meetings that are going on. I know that several of the teams are meeting two times a week at minimum at this point. But that's where we stand with the 901 projects. Next slide, please. We've got some other NERC standards happenings with the other projects. There is a ballot period coming up in July for the SIP 14 standard that will be balloted. So that's up and coming. And then there's several drafting teams that are open for nominations right now. They're looking for to supplement teams. Many of these are in a different phase. They're a little bit older. They've been working, and they've found that they need more or more specific expertise on the teams. So they've decided to put that out there to supplement the teams, or others were not able to participate going forward. So on this slide, these are the current periods, the nomination periods that are open for the different drafting teams that are up. Also, the Project 2023-07 Transmission System Planning Performance Requirements for Extreme Weather, that is going to be up for a 30-day nomination period. It was not up at the time of making these slides, but it was approved by the NERC Standards Committee to go out for drafting team solicitation. So that's where those are. There's opportunity if you have the time or the feel the need to jump on to some of these projects are looking for members if you have the expertise for that. If there's interest, reach out, go to the NERC website. They're open right now. And then the Modernization of Standards Process and Procedures Task Force recently put out a survey that they opened up and asked several questions. And they're looking over the responses to that. You know, are they finding categories? Are they finding families of similar suggestions? There's a lot on the table. It's basically open for looking at the entire process when it comes to standards and procedures on what can they do to have efficiencies to make it better going forward. So they're looking at these responses, and I believe that next February is when they're looking to have their suggestions ready. So they're still in the putting it together phase, if you will, on what they're looking at suggesting and how to move forward with that. Moving on to some WECC standards happenings, we can go to the next slide. We have the WECC 157. This was the PRC 6.5 automatic underfrequency load shedding update to the WECC regional variance project. That was approved for drafting team solicitation to go out. So probably next week, you'll see if you're on the mail list for the standards information, you'll see a drafting team solicitation come out just telling you, this is what the project is, what it's for, and if you would like to nominate to be on the drafting team, how to do that. We'll have it go out in the weekly as well. We'll get with Melee so that can be solicited and socialized out so the industry can find it. So we're going to be looking for drafting team members to put that project into the works. And then the WECC 142, this request to retire the BAL 2 WECC 3 standard for contingency reserve, the WECC board did vote to approve asking NERC and FERC to retire the standard. So it's gone through our process here at the region, and now we're going to go and file it with NERC. And the bottom bullet point, it does not mean that it's automatically going to happen. It's got to go through the NERC and the FERC process for consideration. Do we have everything that they need? Is there anything else that they will need? And then the actions on that. So the step we're at with this is to file it with NERC. It will go out for their 45-day comment period. And just as a side note on that one, the NERC 45-day comment period when it comes to the regional standards or regional variances is not another bite of the apple to have a comment on the project itself. It's more or entirely focused on were the procedures and processes followed correctly? Was this done in the correct manner is what the NERC 45-day for this one will be. And then depending on how that comes back and what we need from FERC, we'll file that up there and we'll put it in their hands to see if what they say about retiring the standard out west. So I wish I could give a full time frame on when exactly that would happen, but we're kind of in that, I don't want to say black box area, but there's no solid time frame on when things have to be done by NERC and FERC at this point. So hoping that it will be done or acted on quickly, but there's no time frame for that. But those are the current big NERC or WECC standards happenings out here. And with that, I believe that concludes what I have for the update. I don't think that I have another slide on this. But if there are any questions regarding the standards process, current projects, or if we can give updates on NERC projects, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Donovan. We'll go ahead and move on to our IBR update from Andrew.
All righty. Thanks, Melee. Hello, I'm Andrew Williamson, a registration and certification engineer here at WECC. I'll be the lead presenter today on the inverter-based resources update. With me are Abby Fellinger, a senior registration and certification engineer, and Mark Rogers, the manager of the registration and certification team. You can go to the next slide, please. All right, well, during our last update, we talked quite a bit about the nuts and bolts and details of the IBR initiative. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a different direction and pivot some to talk about the WECC generator welcome package and how it can be help brand new entities become ready for a NERC compliance from a NERC compliance perspective. We'll also review two of the standards for which newly registered entities will be responsible for compliance with once their registration is effective on May 15th, 2026. We're also going to do a quick summary of some of the outreach activities that we have going on, and sprinkle out through the presentation will be some information and resources available for entities registering for the first time, as well as for more experienced folks who are merely adding facilities to their generation fleet as part of the IBR initiative. Get the next slide, please. All right, so let's start with what's the WECC generator welcome package and how can it benefit new entities? And a point I want to make is while today's presentation is really focused on the IBR initiative and the new Category 2 entities, the welcome package is really something that can benefit any new generator facility that's coming online. So with that in mind, a little background: the WECC welcome package is a document developed by WECC to aid new entities both before they are registered and after they're registered, and to help guide newer entities through the process for registration and how to prepare for being a registered entity. I want to make sure we give a little credit where credit's due. Texas RE developed the original welcome package, and both TRE and MPCC have developed generator welcome packages that are very similar to WECC's document, but they also address any regional specific concerns from their point of view. I'm going to be hitting several key items today about the welcome package. Welcome package and other useful documents are available on the WECC website in the registration section. There's a link to the generator package on the slide here. We're going to review the registration process, touch on a little bit on internal controls and the GOP roadmap, which are all included inside of the generator welcome package. Package was developed based on experiences of new generator owners and generator operators. It does not guarantee compliance will be achieved. However, with proper planning and a framework for assessing compliance, an entity is better prepared to be compliant on its registration date, utilizing the information contained in the generator welcome package. With that in mind, entities should consider the following items on the next few slides while they're preparing to bring a new generator online and registering with NERC. Okay, the next slide, please. All right, well, for a brand new entity, if you're bringing a new facility on, there's been years of work to become ready for commercial operations. We just want to make sure that folks understand that an important part of this preparation is preparation for compliance and understanding the rules of procedure and the NERC reliability standards. An entity's compliance obligation begins on the day the entity is registered with NERC and listed on the NERC compliance registry, unless there's a requirement that has an implementation plan or another authoritative document which specifies an alternate date. The entity should be audit ready on day one when it's registered with NERC. And you're going to hear me say that probably several times throughout the process today, because that's important for folks to understand. Compliance can be demonstrated through having documented processes and procedures and evidence of execution of those processes and procedures. When you're bringing a new generator online, compliance consideration should be considered early in the process. When you prepare a new generator as a new generator owner or a generator operator for compliance, it may take you 6 to 12 months of preparation to be ready for NERC registration, and depending on the maturity of your organization and the existing compliance plan. There are several things to think about when you're developing these processes and procedures. First, general procedures, which merely restate the standard, aren't always the best. When monitoring, we're going to look to see how your specific entity is being compliant. Related to this, the best procedures are those that are written with the actual operating procedures that the women and men who operate the grid on a daily basis follow, incorporating steps to ensure and document compliance into these operational procedures. Simply regurgitating the language of the requirement cannot always provide this, and it rarely helps a system operator. Also, make sure that the procedures make sense. By this, I mean, before my current role, I was an auditor at FRCC. And when I make the comment about a procedure making sense, I got an example. I mean, I once saw a procedure for PRC5, which in this case dealt with checking batteries. The entity had their operators check the batteries once per shift. Now, this is an excellent practice. I don't want to discourage that, but you should consider the required documentation if this is what you state in your procedure. How are you going to document this? You're going to need a check sheet or some other form of evidence for every shift. And an auditor is going to probably do a random sample of all those, and it may be somewhat burdensome to maintain that documentation and to find it and provide it to an audit team member. Perhaps having the procedure read that the batteries will be checked once per day, while continuing checking a check each shift would have been a better plan and made a little more sense for this entity. Now, once your compliance program is built, WECC has responsibility to check on registered entities for their compliance. And we've got several tools in our toolbox to do this. The first being a compliance audit. An audit is our largest engagement, where you're going to have a team of auditors that assess compliance with the reliability standards for your entity. And they're going to have a scope that's developed based on the unique risks for your entity. There'll be a compliance oversight plan developed, and this will help guide the scope. Spot checks are another tool in our arsenal. They're similar to audits, but they're usually smaller and have much more focused scope. Maybe looking at a specific standard requirement or a certain type of risk that we're very interested in looking at. And self-certifications usually target one or multiple standards, and this is where an entity will self-certify that they're compliant, basically responding to some questions that we have, and then the team will evaluate any required evidence and responses. I get the next slide, please. All right. Inside of the WECC generator welcome package, it addresses there's a lot of phases for bringing a new facility online. When you bring a new generator online or establish a generator operator, an entity can think of compliance kind of as a continuum. And there's a key milestone at NERC registration, but there's a lot of other very important steps that have to be gone through. There are pre-registration compliance activities, such as developing the processes and procedures I've been talking about, establishing internal controls, commissioning equipment, testing facilities, performing initial compliance activities where necessary, with the end of this pre-registration phase being marked by the completion of NERC registration and the listing on the NERC compliance registry. As noted on the previous slide, the entity's compliance obligations begin on the day that they're registered. Post-registration activities can either be event-driven or time-based. An entity should have processes in place to determine and track both types of activities. The focus of the welcome package is to help you through this continuum to be successful, not only in preparing for the commercial activity around running your units, but also for the compliance and the compliance world afterwards. A key point is the initial compliance activities. Remember, I said you need to be compliant on the day you're listed on the NERC compliance registry. This means you have to have documentation of your process and procedures in place, already written, and have implemented them where appropriate as required for each standard. This can take the form of testing relays for PRC5 and activities often associated with commissioning or checkout, having your facilities ratings for FAC 8, or having alarming, which can be a type of internal control, or your voltage regulator to ensure it's an automatic and controlling voltage. Another example would be SIP 2-5, having your BES cyber system categorization. It needs to be completed prior to registration, as does SIP senior manager approval for identification of the categorizations. Again, the welcome package has a plethora of information in it that I'm not going to be able to touch everything there. Highly recommend you take a moment and go to our website, download it, look at it, read it, because this can have a lot of great details to help you in a pre-registration phase. It includes tables with standards and requirements to consider. They're there to help you for your success in the post-registration phase. Again, highly recommend you take a look at it. Also, post-registration, you need to make sure that you're keeping accurate records of the execution of your process and procedures to be able to demonstrate compliance. Again, the welcome package has a lot of information on how this can be achieved and the things you really need to focus on. And if you're a brand new entity and you're new to the new compliance world, this could be very helpful. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? All right. NERC registration is coordinated with a registered entity's registration team. And the submission of the registration package typically occurs 60 days prior to the planned registration date. All right, this is for your typical Category 1 or our current registration process. Thinking about IVRs, it's going to be a little different, but the registration date is closely tied with your commercial operations date, more for the Category 1 than it is for the process we're going through with this initiative. So when you work with our registration team, we usually like to do this well before your commercial operation date. We're going to work with you to obtain the necessary information to make the registration process smooth and efficient. And this slide contains a list of some incredible resources that can help you through that process. As you look at these, again, if you ever have any questions, you can reach out to anyone on our team and we're going to help you with it. But during the registration process, we're going to look for key details about your facility. We're seeking to understand the type of generation facility. If it's an IVR, we're looking to understand the number of inverters that compose the facility, including their make, model, and individual rating. And we use this type of information to help verify the gross nameplate rating for the facility. Why we're doing this is we also seek to understand any power purchase agreements you may have or any other agreements that may limit you. You may have a limitation from your generation interconnection agreement. But again, as we look at the facility rating, we're looking at the overall capacity. So you may have a IBR, if we're looking at the maybe 44.5 NVA, but you've got an agreement that says you're not going to be ever generate more than 40 megawatts. We're going to look at it and say that the facility rating for that, as we're looking at it, would be 44.5. I was talking a little bit earlier about some of the dates. With a case for Category 2 IVRs, this is going to be all this work will take place well before the registration date or effective date of May 15th, 2026, as part of the IVR initiative that we're going through. As NERC and the regions collaborate to make some updates and changes inside of cores to support this, we actually plan to begin registering Category 2 IVRs in August. We're in the testing phase with cores, and so far things are looking pretty good. But again, a key point I want to make here is that the effective date for all the registration for Category 2 generator owners will be May 15th, 2026. That's when your compliance obligations will occur. With the IVR initiative, we're going to do what we can to register people before that date, with the letter stating very specifically the future date that is the effective date. We're doing this because in WECC alone, we have over 300 facilities, and even more than that across the entire ERO. And we just want to make sure things can be processed efficiently and we don't overload and bottleneck the system. Like I said, I say that WECC has over 300. So if you are not in the first batch to go through there, it's okay. We have to work through as we can to register or evaluate and then register folks. in batches throughout the process. Our goal is to have these all, or they all will be done by May 15th of next year. Our goal is to have these done earlier than that in the first quarter of 2026. And again, if you ever have any questions about the IBR process, please reach out to anybody on the team. Again, on this slide, we included a lot of links for some great information that we think will be helpful. This can answer a lot of your questions. If they don't, or if you have questions about these documents, please reach out to us and talk to us. Anyone on the team, we'd be glad to work with you and support you to help you be successful throughout this process. But also, if in reviewing any of these documents, you happen to see an opportunity for improvement or the inclusion of additional material that might be beneficial, please let us know, as we're always striving to improve our processes. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? All right, some other stuff that's in the generator welcome package that, again, this is great for new entities as well as established entities adding new facilities. One of these things is NERC compliance guidance. Compliance guidance is developed under the compliance guidance policy, and it includes two different types of compliance guidance documents, which can be found on the NERC website. Also out here is implementation guidance. This is developed by registered entities, and it provides examples for implementing a standard. And again, if you're a brand new facility, brand new generator owner, and you haven't done this before, what better way than to find information from how your peers are doing things and how they can be successful? Compliance monitoring enforcement program practice guides are developed by the ERO CMEP staff to provide direction to same staff on how to approaches to carry out compliance monitoring and enforcement. Well, if you understand how we're going to be carrying things out, it helps you understand the information you may need to supply and process to be more effective and make some of the engagements like audits or spot checks go more smoothly. So understanding these can be a huge help for an entity. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Some other information that's included in the welcome package is lessons learned. The welcome package contains a link to some lessons learned and event reports, and these are relevant for new facilities because they're associated with newer facilities and emerging risks associated with some of the technologies and the changing resource mix. Registered entities are encouraged to review these, as well as both new and existing entities, and learn about the resource and review the reports, evaluate how the recommendations and conclusions may affect your facility and how they can enhance your reliability and security. Again, you can learn from challenges others have had. And so this is a great way to, again, make your facility more secure and help ensure your compliance. The link will take you to the NERC site. It's a great reference for you to learn from the challenges others may have encountered and also learn how they overcame them. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Another one here we talk about in the welcome package is internal controls. It'll talk about the types of internal controls, testing of internal controls, but it's also got some tables listing potential internal controls that you may consider. Internal controls they're there to help companies operate effectively and efficiently, while reducing risk of non-compliance and improving the reliability and security of the bulk electric system. Many entities have internal controls, but they don't always recognize them as such because they don't have that label associated. They're just part of their existing methods and processes. Often this is because the controls again, it's part of doing business and not something specifically called out in a separate document called an internal control. The welcome package provides some really good information to help entities identify such existing controls. It provides a general overview for building an internal control program and specific internal controls for applicable requirements. More specific considerations are provided in the controls consideration column of the internal controls type table in the welcome package. Again, if I try to put this on a slide, it would have covered multiple slides, and it's really something you need to go out and take a look at. But the table revolves around the concepts of preventative, detective, and corrective internal controls, And entities can use this framework as they're building out their internal control processes. Talking a little bit about what these are, preventative control is rather what it sounds like. It's a control designed to prevent a negative event or a negative risk from occurring. Preventative controls could be physical or administrative. Good example is a badge reader on a control center door. It prevents someone who doesn't have authorized access from entering. Another type is a corrective control. Corrective controls, again, the name kind of says it all. When a negative event occurs, a corrective control is there to bring you back into compliance, basically returning to a normal state. If I use an example for an automatic regulator, an example may be a procedure or technology the generator operator would use to restore the AVR to its normal status if it were to trip out of automatic mode. Basically, it'd be a procedure you could execute in response to an alarm, so an alarm response procedure. Part of the compliant and as part of the compliance program during an audit or spot check, we're going to take a look at these and assess them. And this will be something we feed back to our risk group as they will go through and take a look at the overall risk, the inherent risk that the entity represents. And then you consider the controls that it can help reduce the risk. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? I mentioned some of the tables. Again, I took a couple excerpts of these here. We've got a procedural control, talking about it, so initial performance, and this is part of the GOP roadmap inside of the welcome package. They're split into different sections based on the type of requirements for the reliability standards. Intended to help a newly registered entity focus on developing expectations for their staff or the process they need to maintain reliability. Again, this is something that's great back in that pre-registration phase that I was talking about. Early in the continuum, if you can look at these, it helps you looking at all of the right things. An example of this might be PRC5. Again, it's a time-based type of requirement. In this case, to maintain a proper protection system for automatic and closing relays. Information in the table can really help when you're planning stages. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? All right, this one, all right, this is the first of the two standards I talked about that we want to take a look at. This is not going to be a detailed dive into how to achieve 100% compliance. We're just trying to make people aware of some of the standards they're going to have to be compliant with on day one. So again, first one I'm going to talk about here is FAC 8. The frame of reference for the approach I'm taking is for a newly registered entity in the planning phases for becoming registered. So if you're still building your facility, developing facility ratings will be a key component in developing the compliance program and should definitely be taking place during your planning phases, as you need to understand the equipment ratings in the design process. As I said, we start with FAC 8. They're used for the purpose of FAC 8 is to ensure that facility ratings are used in reliable planning and operation of the bulk electric system and are determined based on technically sound principles. A facility rating is essential for the determination of system operating limits. Okay, the purpose helps explain what's expected and why FAC 8 is important. It's a building block for other standards. As I mentioned, the designers of your facility really understand the rating of the equipment, and this is required for them to make sure the facility performs as designed. So make sure that they build something that works the way the customer or the generator owner expects it to. Okay. I apologize, everyone. I did not turn off my Teams messaging, so you're probably hearing lots of beeps in the presentation. So I apologize for that. As I mentioned, designers of a facility definitely understand the rating of equipment, and this is required to make sure the entity has the documentation for how it is done, and includes, and part of the process is it will include equipment up to, as I'm looking at requirement 1 now, it's going to include equipment up to the low side of your main step-up transformer if the entity does not own the step-up transformer. And if the entity does own the transformer, it will go to the high side of the transformer. I didn't include all of the sub-requirements here, but the key to requirement 1 is to have documentation for how you will establish facility ratings for all the components that make up your facility. This is where the audit or spot check team will start. They're going to want to review your documentation and look to how to see that it addresses the 2 sub-requirements. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, looking at requirement 2, we now need to have a documented methodology to determine a facility rating from the point established in requirement 1, the lower high side of the transformer, onto the point of interconnection for the facility owner. Like requirement 1, I have not included all the sub-requirements here for requirement 2. These provide very specific details which the documented methodology you're developing must contain. An example here would be the methodology used to determine the rating needs to be included, the underlying assumptions that you're following, a statement of the rating with respect to most limiting element. These are required components you have to have in the methodology. There are additional details, but my objective today is to make sure the new generator owner is aware of the responsibilities in developing a methodology prior to reaching commercial operation state. As again, remember, you need to be compliant on day 1. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? All right, you'll see on this one, we're in requirement 3. It's incredibly similar. It merely applies to a transmission owner. I included here today as some new GOs may also be TOs, depending on the facility they built and how things exist. Again, everything I said for requirement 2 will apply to requirement 3. All right, if we move on to requirement 6, our next slide. Your final step, if you're looking at FAC 8, is to actually have the ratings. And this is covered by requirement 6. This is where you have to take all of the process and procedures you develop, your facility ratings methodology that were developed in accordance with the requirements of R2 and R3 as applicable. And this is where you demonstrate you've actually developed the ratings. You consider all the components that make up the facility and your documentation, the rating, and then you make sure that the rating is consistent with your methodology. So you need to ensure that the methodology contains sections for each type of component that makes up your facility. And further, the rating of the components is in accordance with methodology under requirement 2. All right, if we can go to the next slide, it continues on with some common themes with FAC 8. And this, again, these are things we've observed over the years. First, you talk about, well, how does an entity, when you do maintenance or update a facility, you need to have a good change management process in place to ensure that if a change does occur, which may affect your facility rating, there's a process whereby once the project's done, you go back, reassess the rating, and update it as necessary. That way, the facility rating is updated accordingly. Again, I didn't give too much of my background in the beginning, but I originally began in the compliance world in Florida. We had these little things called hurricanes. And if you're recovering from a hurricane, you're doing everything you can to get facilities back into service quickly. So this change management part was hugely important. You may or may not have the exact component, but you needed to get the facility. So it's very important. Another key piece here is a walk down, either by the facility staff or by WECC. Sometimes simply walking down your facility and ensuring all the components are included in the methodology can be one of the most effective tools. It's a good detective control to see if you included everything. making sure nothing somehow slipped through, and again, you're looking for a change. You may have a change management process, but by walking it down and laying your eyes on it, you're checking it. And this is a tool that the audit staff has at their disposal to field validate facility ratings. A good practice is third-party identification. This can be staff from another facility that your company owns. It can be staff from another entity that you collaborate with, and you look down one of their facilities and you help with theirs. Or you can have an external firm. But the real benefit is an extra set of eyes in this, through this process, that third-party verification. Final theme that we see has been a common situation where the facility methodology may miss something, or that asset data management may have missed something, either initially when a change occurs. Again, these are things that happen, and it's really important that you have a strong change management process. And using some of the tools we talked about, facility walkdowns or third-party verification, check. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? All right, talking more, so I'm going to try to be a little quick here as we reach the end. Next I want to talk about is PRC 19 for a new generator owner. The purpose of PRC 19 is to verify coordination of the generator unit or facility or synchronous condensing unit, voltage regulator controls, limit functions, and equipment capabilities and protection settings. A key point, dispersed power producing resources are very different than synchronous machine facilities. Since they're not synchronous, they don't have the typical excitation systems, and typically dispersed power systems dispersed power resource facilities just need to ensure coordination between their controls of the various high, low, and low voltage tripping. But they also need to communicate this, and the standard requires that once every 5 years that a new GO would coordinate with applicable entities. This is typically your RC, PC, TP, or your BA. As an entity, it's important to ensure that the critical information is coordinated to make sure that planning models and studies and operations are all accurate. You need to ensure that you have data documentation that demonstrates this coordination. It can be an email or a written documentation. All right, go to the next slide, please. Okay, for requirement 2, this is an example of an event-driven requirement. It requires coordination within 90 days. So if you make a change, you need to ensure that you initiate the coordination, maintain written documentation that this has occurred. This can be voltage regulator setting changes, protection system changes, generating or synchronous condenser capability changes. Again, event-driven, you need to initiate it with your PCs and PC and the other entities I mentioned. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, recent questions. One that we received is, I'm not sure if I need to register as a generator owner. Most important thing here is to communicate with your registration team. We're going to examine the facts and circumstances around your situation, your facility, and we'll let you know if you meet the criteria requiring registration. Category 1, that's 75 or more MVA, or excuse me, more than 75 MVA of generation connected at greater than 100 kV. For category 2, it's having 20 MVA or more of inverter-based generation interconnected at 60 kV or above. Important piece here, understand that you may have multiple facilities sharing a single point of interconnection. In that case, we're going to look at the aggregate of all the facilities there. So you may have a 15 MVA facility, someone else has a 10 MVA facility. If you both aggregate at the same point of interconnection, even though you're both below 20, the aggregate at that location is 25. So you would need to be registered as a category 2. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? I promised a little bit, we talked about outreach. So far, we've hosted 2 outreach sessions, and our next one is scheduled for July 1st. These are mainly geared so far towards new category 2 entities. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? All right. I've sprinkled resources throughout here with links and different information. These are some great information, great resources that are out there for you. So if you talk about the WECC entity registration, if you got a question for us about whether you need to register, if you fill out the generation registration request form and share that with us, that gives us all the information we need to help evaluate your questions and make that determination. Go to the next slide, please. Again, these are some more resources. These are links that you can follow to get some additional information. And our final slide, if we can go to the next slide, is our contact numbers. Again, if you've got any questions about registration or anything that was presented here, here's our information. Just please reach out to us. We'll be glad to work with you, talk about any questions you may have, talk about the process, tell you where we are in the process with your facility, if you have a potential category 2. So with that, with 3 minutes to spare, I'm done, Melee.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm not seeing any questions at this moment, so we'll go ahead and say thank you to all of our presenters today for providing these updates and this information for our attendees. We will be having a call in July, and that will be on July 17th, I think. Next slide, yes, July 17th. We hope to see you then. Have a great rest of your day.